Tree planting is a very dangerous job. You are hours down bush roads, sometimes in the middle of nowhere and very far from the closest town. There's oftentimes no service, very rarely will you have Wi-Fi, and there are a lot of dangers and hazards out there kind of waiting for you. So let's just talk about what those hazards are. First of all, a huge shout out to Nicholas, who posted on one of my previous videos, actually commented on almost all of my videos so far, and suggested that I do this one, talking about how they would like to know what the hazards are with tree planting, which I think is awesome. I have about 15 pages right now of content ideas and plans throughout the 7 months of me planting this year, how I want to get them and capture it all and what I want to do with it later. I think it's really cool to have people suggesting what it is that they want to see. So, because there's probably a lot of stuff that I didn't think of. So a huge shout out to Nicholas for suggesting this. I'm dedicating this video to you. And if anybody does have stuff that they want to see, just let me know. So I am going to go over the top 6 hazards, in my opinion, that come with tree planting. And at the end, I have a few honorable mention hazards that I'll go over as well. So let's get started. I'm gonna start with the one that probably has the most amount of impact on me as a planter over my career. And if anybody who has been with me since the beginning, especially the first 3 seasons, I am somebody who always has run-ins with the wildlife. Wildlife being the first hazard I'm going to talk about. And when I say that I have run-ins with wildlife, I'm specifically talking about black bears. Bears are probably the #1 animal that present the most amount of threat to you that you are going to see the most while out doing a season during a season of tree planting. You know, they are scavengers, they're very curious, and when you take a big collection of tree planters and you drop them off into the middle of the bush, way out in the middle of nowhere, there are going to be scents, and there's going to be a lot of things that bears are going to be drawn towards, and that's just going to create, you know, a lot of bear sightings, whether it's at the block where you're planting, on the bush roads, on the way to work every morning or on the way home, and at camp. Something that my old crew boss and my now supervisor love to talk about at every orientation every season is I have had 3 of my tents destroyed by bears because I wasn't very diligent with keeping scented items outside of my tents. In my rookie season and in my vet season and my first 3 seasons, I've had tents destroyed because I would go to work, I would leave something in my tent that had scents, and it would just get absolutely mauled. I'd get back to camp, my tent's destroyed, my belongings and my clothing are scattered throughout, and whatever scented item it was, the one year it was a bag of all dress ruffles, it's gone, and all my shit's just fucking destroyed. So I have a lot of beef with bears, but at the same time, I personally don't view them as much of a threat, and this is probably a weird way to look at it, but I've always considered black bears in the bush to be more like giant raccoons that could kill you if they wanted to, but they generally don't. Like I said earlier, they are just scavengers, they are just curious, they are looking for food, and they are going to avoid you if they hear you. The only time they're really going to get threatening and aggressive is if they're startled, or if they feel like the only way they can get away from you is to go through you. Maybe they feel like they're cornered. But generally, they are going to be much more afraid of you than you are of them. This is something that I have experienced myself. I have come face to face with bears, and I've done that whole make yourself big and scream at them, and they've always run away. The only time that I ever actually get quite afraid when I see anything to do with a bear is when there are cubs. When there are cubs around, the mother is going to be close, and obviously they're going to get very protective, and that is when the signs of aggression will definitely be shown. You'll probably see moose as well quite often. I've actually only ever seen one myself, but there have been a lot of planters and management staff at camps that I've been at that have seen some. But the thing with these is that they're very similar to bears, where they are going to avoid you. If they sense humans, they're not going to go in that area. But they are a lot more territorial and protective of their calves and wherever. If they feel like this is their area and you're kind of going into it, they might show a little bit more signs of aggression. There also have been sightings of wolves, coyotes, and wildcats. In my entire career as a planter, I have seen 1 lynx, and I have heard coyotes twice. Once in Nova Scotia, once in Ontario. So these are animals that are more so nocturnal, and they're gonna be in the more rural areas. So oftentimes you might be camped out kind of close to a town and they might not venture off that close to you. I would more so, when it comes to wildlife, be more concerned about the bears, next to that the moose, and then everything else. You'll also run into bush chickens. Those little motherfuckers can be crazy. The first time I had one show signs of aggression towards me, I thought it was like the end of the world, because I've never seen those things do anything other than sort of stand still and walk. So when I had the first one charging at me, It was quite the fucking experience. These wildlife, it's really just Ontario and kind of out east that I'm talking about. I have never gone to plant, like I said before, out west. I know grizzly bears and maybe wildcats and stuff like that are a little bit more common, but I've never experienced it myself. The second hazard is rough terrain. This is something that I talked about in my physical challenges, but aside from the land being tough, kind of just fucking with you physically and mentally, it also presents a lot of dangers where, you know, you are going to be planting in areas that have a lot of slash piles. There's going to be a lot of deep water areas, a lot of bogs, a lot of cliffs, fallen trees, rocks. And when you add on top of all of that about 50 pounds of trees sometimes, and you're trying to lift up and climb over everything, there's a lot of danger presented just by you falling, tripping, getting stuck, getting lost. I have seen a lot of people get injured just from the difficult terrain being hard to move through, where somebody they fell in their piece, they twisted their ankle, they broke something, and they've had to go home. So there are a lot of dangers with the kind of land. We're not moving through and planting in flat open areas of land. We might be on some pretty hefty cliffs and some very steep hills, and there's a lot of like debris and stuff in the way that you're trying to maneuver over. So it can get pretty dicey sometimes. The third hazard is bush road driving. Now, as a rookie planter or even as a vet, not often are you going to be expected to drive. This is more so going to be your crew boss and the other management staff. Sometimes there'll be rookie planters or even vets who are driving too, but it's mostly going to be management. And they're going to be driving all kinds of things like trucks, school buses, vans, quads, side-by-sides. And when it comes to bush road driving, you are going down logging roads a lot of the time. So these are quite narrow, they're windy, there's a lot of dust, so visibility can get, lowered pretty severely if you're following closely behind somebody else that's driving. And there's going to be a lot of wildlife. There's always a threat of wildlife jumping out onto the road. There could be rabbits, bears, moose, deer, anything like that. But the number one hazard when it comes to bush road driving is the other traffic on the road. So like I said, the roads are narrow and you are going to have a lot of loaded up logging trucks ripping down these roads. Now, every contractor and everyone who is using these roads, they have radios and they're constantly calling their kilometer marker and what direction they're going in. So usually when you're driving, you have an idea of what other vehicles are on the road, where they are, and which direction they're going in. So if you're paying attention to where you are, you can kind of gauge when you're going to meet up with them. You can pull over to the side. Now, there have been some close calls with me in a truck where somebody's not calling their kilometers, maybe one of the logging trucks isn't. And with how narrow the roads are and how quickly these trucks go, there could be some close calls. So there's a lot of strategies in place to make sure that there are no accidents or anything, but the threat is always there with how much traffic are on these roads. Number 4, this is the weather conditions. I talked about this one in my other videos as well when it comes to the challenges, but this is something that, depending on what the weather is, could actually present some danger towards you. There's heat exhaustion is very real, which only just gets expedited the hotter it is. Dehydration is going to be something that happens to you, and even on the rain days, you can fight dehydration as well, because when it's raining, sometimes you don't realize how thirsty you are, and you'll go through a 10-hour day of planting and barely drink any water. So there are a lot of dangers to your body depending on the weather. I have actually planted in weather that is 30 degrees and hotter, below freezing. I planted in snow, hail, pouring rain. The only time that you are actually going to be evacuated because of the weather, because with most things, you're going to be expected to plant through it. It's pouring rain, you're going to be planting. It's hot, you're going to be planting. The only time that you'll actually really get pulled is if there is a thunderstorm or lightning, and if the wind gets bad. The wind is probably the weather condition that presents the most amount of danger to you, because of when a logging company is logging a part of the forest, they actually have to leave a lot of trees standing for the wildlife, the local wildlife. So what this means is where you are, you're going to be replanting an area that's 99% logged, but all throughout there will be tall, dead standing trees. We call them chicos, and a small gust of wind or just, any kind of wind could potentially, if it's, strong enough, is going to knock those trees over. So you could be planting in an area, and then as the wind picks up, there will literally be trees falling down around you. When that happens, you are going to be pulled, and this is something that happens quite often. Number 5 is poisonous plants. This is something that I don't really have any experience with, but they're definitely out there. I have seen some giant hogweed myself, thorn bushes, poison ivy. I've never actually come in contact with anything, but I've seen others at my camp come in contact with it, and I've seen a few hospital visits from that kind of stuff. Just look into where the region that you're planting in and what kind of species of poisonous cannabis plants are kind of local to that area and just familiarize yourself with it. Something that I've actually been really bad with in my career. I've never done this, but I've gotten this far and nothing has happened, but that doesn't mean that those threats aren't out there. So just familiarize yourself with the plants that are in your areas that you're going to be planting in, and then just go from there. And the sixth hazard I'll talk about, this is the camp location. This might be one that not many people think of when it comes to hazards, but it's something that I definitely wanted to talk about for a couple of reasons. There are going to be times where you are maybe 3 to 4 hours down bush roads in the middle of nowhere. If you have Starlink, maybe you got Wi-Fi, but not often will there be Wi-Fi, internet, or service where you are. So you are pretty secluded from civilization. Now this is bad for a couple of reasons and is hazardous for a couple of reasons. Number one is wildfires. In my third season, we were planting in a part of the forest, and a little bit close to us, another planting contract actually got shut down because their forest, White River, was actually on fire. And where we were camped out, which is pretty far, the smoke was starting to really decrease the visibility, and we had an evacuation meeting just talking about what would happen if it got severe. Luckily, the fire got under control and everything was kind of okay, but with how many wildfires appear every single year, especially during the planting season when it's really dry, there are a lot of risks when it comes to being so remote, and that you're just kind of surrounded by all of this fucking kindling. And where it is a little bit more dangerous being so far from civilization is if there's ever a medical emergency. So I have seen quite a few people have to go to the hospital. Not often has it been an emergency, but I have seen infections. I've seen a severe allergic reaction where somebody did have to get rushed to the hospital. I've seen people getting sick. So there is a chance that you're gonna have to go to the hospital. And when this happens, it does take a couple hours to get there. So those are the 6 that I was gonna talk about. I actually have 4 honorable mentions, so I could have just done 10 hazards. I don't know why I'm doing honorable mentions, but I got 4, so let's get into those too. Kind of going in with the remote locations for a camp, it's the fact that you aren't going to have service and you are going to have probably no access to internet or Wi-Fi. So if there is ever an emergency, if there's ever anything going on, you might be stuck until you can find your way to an area that has service. So that is something that could present some kind of danger depending on the situation. The next one is something that has affected friends of mine, but it is like bees and allergies. So familiarize yourself with what kind of allergies you may have, and maybe you can't, and you're going to find out. I have seen some people get stung by bees or wasps or hornets, and it's caused some kind of allergic reaction where they had to go to the hospital. So there is a threat out there where if you aren't aware of what your allergies are, you might find out by getting stung while you're out in a remote location in the middle of nowhere. So that is definitely a threat. The next is something that ties into a lot that I'm talking about, but it's just the repetitive motion and the weight of your trees and how often you're bending over. It very often leads to injury. And then the last one, this is the biggest one. My girlfriend and I learned the hard way this year about this one, and this is wherever you are planting, try and familiarize yourself with any kind of sicknesses or infections or fucking funguses that could be out in the area that you're planting in. Our dog got very sick this year and we didn't know what it was. It was actually originally diagnosed as cancer, and then it was a misdiagnosis. We found out that it was something called blastomycosis, and that is a fungal infection where you breathe in a spore that gets knocked up from the ground, you breathe it in and it turns into a fungus, and then it just kind of like spreads throughout your body. It has a pretty high fatality rate. He got diagnosed. He's been going through, at this moment, he's been going through treatment for like 6 months and probably has another 6 months. It is expensive. And when we found out about this, it was something that we never heard of before. So he breathed it in and he got sick. It's something that can also affect humans. Who knows what else is out there? So I would just, wherever region you're planting is similar to the poisonous plants, familiarize yourself with whatever history of sicknesses have come from that part of the province or the country, wherever it is that you're planting. Anyways, that is the end of this video. I am going to, in the future, definitely go over the tips and tricks to kind of combat these, but I wanted to put them on everybody's radar and just kind of talk about them for now. So thank you for watching. The countdown is on. I am officially like 1 month away from flying out to New Brunswick and starting 7 months of planting. Let's look out for another new video next Friday. And until then, everybody, thank you, love you, and 2 steps tree. Don't forget.